It began like every fairy tale that television loves to create, two beautiful people, thrown together by destiny, sharing scenes that seemed too real to be scripted. Demet Özdemir and Yaman were supposed to act in love, but from the very first take, everyone on set could feel it, this wasn't acting anymore. The way their eyes met, the nervous laughter between scenes, the subtle gestures when the camera wasn't rolling, it all betrayed something deeper. The chemistry was undeniable, magnetic, almost dangerous. Directors whispered that they had never seen anything like it. Extras paused just to watch them rehearse. When Demet smiled, Can's entire energy changed. When Can improvised a line, Demet followed as if she already knew his thoughts. It was as if they spoke a secret language only they could understand. The world outside noticed it too. Fans became obsessed. Social media exploded with every new scene, every glance, every photo of them together. They weren't just co-stars anymore, they were symbols of a perfect love story. They're meant for each other, fans said. They belong together. At first, Demet was flattered. She admired Can's charisma, his passion, the way he carried himself with confidence and certainty. He was unpredictable, charming one moment, serious the next, and always full of energy. He pushed her to grow, to take risks, to trust her instincts. But that same fire that made him fascinating also made him impossible to ignore. Can was intense in everything he did, work, emotions, relationships. When he loved fiercely. When he wanted something, he wouldn't stop until he got it. That passion, so breathtaking at first, began to feel heavy on her shoulders. Behind the cameras, the expectations only grew. Producers saw the magic between them and quietly encouraged it, interviews together, public appearances, magazine covers. Keep the chemistry alive, they said. It sold stories, boosted ratings, made headlines. But for Demet, it started to feel like her real life was being written by someone else. The more famous their love story became, the less control she had over her own emotions. She didn't know where Sanam ended and Demet began. Every smile, every touch, every interview was scrutinized, replayed, analyzed by millions. And even when she wanted silence, when she wanted to just breathe, the world demanded more. At night, when the lights went off and the studio was quiet, Demet would replay the day in her mind. The laughter, the scenes, the moments when Can's eyes locked with hers and time seemed to stop. She wondered if he felt it too, that strange mix of love and suffocation, of beauty and pressure. It was the beginning of something beautiful, but also the start of a storm that neither of them could stop. Fame changes everything, and for Demet Özdemir, it changed faster than she could breathe. One morning she was an actress chasing roles, the next, she was the face of Turkey's most beloved love story. Every magazine cover carried her smile. Every headline linked her name to Yaman's. Their chemistry had turned into a brand, something bigger than either of them. But what the world didn't see was the price behind that perfect picture. Fame wasn't just adoration. It was noise, questions, flashes, and pressure. When fans screamed their names together, it sounded like love, but it also felt like a cage. Everywhere Demet went, people expected her to act like Sanam, to speak like her, to live out a fantasy that wasn't hers. And Can, for all his charm and magnetism, didn't make things easier. He was born to dominate every room he entered. Strong, confident, fiercely protective of what he loved. But that protection often came wrapped in control. He liked to know where things were heading, what people said, how she reacted. He had built his life on discipline, training, perfection. At first, Demet found that inspiring. She saw in him the drive of someone who never settled for less. But as months passed, that drive began to press against her freedom. He would call late at night after long shoots, asking why she hadn't answered earlier. He'd question her interviews, "Why did you say it like that? Did you really need to mention that scene?" It wasn't jealousy, he said. It was care. It was love. But love shouldn't make you feel smaller. And that's how Demet slowly began to feel, smaller, quieter, as if her light had to shine only where his shadow allowed. Even on set, People began to notice the tension. Between takes, Demet would sometimes walk away, needing a breath of air. Can, intense as always, would follow, trying to fix things immediately. "Talk to me," he'd say, his voice soft but unrelenting. She'd smile, pretending everything was fine, because the world was watching. But inside, she was breaking. Each interview became a performance, each public appearance a balancing act between affection and exhaustion. When fans shouted, "Marry him," she'd laugh, but inside, her heart whispered something else: "I just want peace." She loved him, or at least, the version of him she met at the beginning. But fame, expectations, and the endless public gaze had turned that love into something heavy, something that demanded more than she could give. And one night, as she looked at her reflection after another exhausting day of pretending, Demet realized that the girl in the mirror wasn't smiling anymore. She was surviving. There comes a moment in every relationship when words stop meaning what they used to. For Demet and Can, that moment came quietly, like a slow sunset that nobody notices until it's already dark. They had once talked for hours, about dreams, scripts, travel, the future. But now their conversations felt rehearsed, cautious, safe. Can's texts came less often, his tone colder, his calls shorter. He said he was busy: interviews, gym, projects, flights. But Demet could feel the distance even when he was sitting right beside her. At first, she blamed herself. Maybe she was too sensitive, too emotional, too demanding. Maybe she was reading too much into his silence. But deep down, she knew something had shifted. The fire that once burned between them was now something else: smoke, confusion, and the echo of what used to be love. The pressure from the outside world didn't stop. Fans still asked for photos, journalists still chased them for quotes. "Are you still together? When's the wedding? Do you fight?" The questions stung because they all touched a truth that neither of them wanted to admit. Ken handled it the only way he knew how, with control. "Don't read the comments," he told her. "Don't let them affect you." But it was too late. Demet wasn't just fighting the tabloids, she was fighting herself. She had lost her joy. Every time she smiled for a camera, she felt like she was betraying her own feelings. And every time Ken tried to pull her closer, she felt the walls closing in. He didn't understand why she needed space. For him, love was closeness. For her, it was freedom, and freedom was the one thing she no longer had. Nights became the hardest. Alone in her apartment, surrounded by silence, Demet replayed their story in her mind like an old film reel: the laughter, the arguments, the apologies that didn't fix anything. She wondered when exactly love had turned into obligation. One evening, after yet another day of pretending, she received a message from Ken. "Don't let people get between us," he wrote. "You know I love you." She read it several times but couldn't reply. Not because she didn't care, but because she no longer recognized the version of herself who used to wait for those words. It wasn't anger she felt. It wasn't even sadness. It was something colder: acceptance. A quiet realization that she was drifting away, not because she wanted to, but because staying was starting to hurt. For the first time, silence said everything that words could not. The day everything changed wasn't loud or dramatic. There were no fights, no slammed doors, no final speeches filled with anger. It was just quiet. Too quiet. They were supposed to meet at a small cafe near the Bosphorus, a place that once held laughter, where they used to talk about everything and nothing. But this time, there was no spark in their eyes, no laughter waiting to escape. Just two people sitting across from each other, both knowing what neither dared to say out loud. Ken looked tired, not physically, but emotionally. The kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to hold something together that's already falling apart. He reached for her hand, but she didn't move. Her gaze was distant, lost somewhere beyond the waves outside the window. "Demet," he said softly, "why are you so far away from me lately?" She hesitated. For a second, she almost lied, almost said she was fine. But then something inside her broke open, and the truth poured out. I'm tired, Can, she whispered. Not of you, but of everything around us. Of pretending to be perfect, of smiling when I want to cry, of answering questions I never asked to be asked. I feel like I can't breathe anymore. He frowned, not understanding. You're just stressed. We'll take a break, travel somewhere, she interrupted, shaking her head. No, you don't understand. I'm tired of the pressure. Of your control. Of always having to be who everyone else wants me to be. You, the fans, the press, everyone. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. For the first time, she wasn't acting. Ken looked away. His jaw tightened, his fingers tapping the table. He wasn't used to losing control, especially not with her. I only wanted to protect us, he said quietly. Everything I did was for you. Demet smiled sadly. Maybe. But love shouldn't feel like protection. It should feel like freedom. There was a long silence between them. Heavy, suffocating, final. The kind of silence that ends stories. He didn't argue. He didn't chase her when she stood up. He just watched her walk away, the sound of her heels fading into the Istanbul air. And that was it. No goodbye, no closure, just the realization that sometimes love isn't enough when it starts to feel like a cage. That night, Demet sat alone in her apartment, surrounded by scripts, magazines, photos, reminders of a life that once sparkled. She scrolled through old pictures of them laughing, hugging, playing around on set. And for the first time, she didn't cry. She just closed her phone, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, "It's over." And that's okay. The following weeks felt strange. The world continued spinning, but Demet felt suspended between two realities, the one everyone thought she lived, and the one she was finally building for herself. Tabloids exploded with headlines, Demet and Can split. The end of a fairy tale. Paparazzi followed her car, reporters shouted questions, but she stayed silent. There was power in that silence, a calm that came from finally choosing herself. Behind the noise, Ken struggled too. He posted cryptic messages, quoted poems about loss and strength. People read between the lines, guessing what had gone wrong. But only the two of them knew, it wasn't betrayal or anger that ended them. It was exhaustion. Too much love that turned into too much pressure. Demet started focusing on her craft again. New roles, new beginnings, quieter mornings. She found comfort in small things, coffee at sunrise, dancing barefoot in her living room, laughter with friends who didn't ask about the past. For the first time in years, she was just Demet, not Sanam, not Can's love, not a headline. Just herself. Still, there were moments when his memory returned, sudden, sharp, and bittersweet. A familiar song, a scent, a city street they once walked together. And every time, she smiled softly and whispered, "I hope you're okay." Can, on his part, never spoke publicly about that final conversation. But those close to him said something in him changed. He became quieter, more introspective. He stopped chasing cameras and started chasing peace. Perhaps he finally understood what she meant, that love without freedom isn't love, it's captivity. Months later, they crossed paths at an industry event. Cameras flashed instantly, fans screamed, the room buzzed with excitement. But when their eyes met, everything went still. No bitterness, no pain, just respect, and something unspoken, gratitude. He smiled first. She smiled back. And then they walked their separate ways, two people who once burned too brightly, now carrying the ashes of a love that taught them both who they really were. As the night ended and Demet stepped into her car, she looked out at the glittering city and thought to herself, sometimes, breaking isn't the end. Sometimes, it's how you start breathing again. And for the first time in a long, long while, she did.